the Art Deco Welcome Center. My name is Daniel Serraldo. I'm the Executive Director here at the Miami Design Preservation League, and we're very excited to have you all here. This is part of our spring presentation series, The Great Streets of the Art Deco District, and we're celebrating 40 years since this neighborhood was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, thanks to the good work of MDPL and others in the community. So we wanted to pick 4 streets, even though there's a lot more awesome streets. But we started with Espanola Way, then we had Collins Avenue, and now we're on to Ocean Drive. And each tour has a complimentary companion walking tour. So this Saturday, please join us for the Ocean Drive walking tour. Joel Levine is here. Where's Joel? Raise your hand in the back. Joel is one of our awesome volunteer tour guides, and he'll be doing the tour. He's also a board member. He'll be doing the walking tour on Saturday morning, 10 a.m., and that walking tour is free, so please make sure to come by, and it'll be a great tour. I also wanted to mention the next lecture is Lincoln Road, and we're going to be having it at the Colony Theater on May 15th. We're very excited. And then a companion Lincoln Road walking tour on May 18th at 10 a.m. in front of the TD Ameritrade building. So if you're not a member, please join on mdpl.org. And are there any tour guides in the audience? Please raise your hands. Thank you to our tour guides who promote with their tours every day of the year and help to keep us on the map. And I'm now going to hand it over to a much better speaker, our moderator. Let's give her a round of applause, Susan Askew.
Thank you, Daniel, and welcome. This is a really fun series that you all are doing, and it's been very interesting and fun to participate in. I am Susan Askew, and I am the founder, editor, writer of RE Miami Beach. It is a blog and weekly newsletter focused only on Miami Beach issues. Tonight we're going to start up here with a brief conversation and then bring it out to the audience for questions. So get your questions ready. I know this is not a shy group. We'll come to you in not too long of a distant future here. I'm going to start with introductions, and to my right is Chauncey Copeland. He is the general manager of Victor Hotels. He has more than 3 decades of senior property management experience, starting in New York City, where he worked at the Carlisle and the legendary Plaza Hotel before relocating to South Florida. He's a specialist in opening high-end properties, and after a 10-year career with Wyndham International, Chauncey directed the operations in the Beach House Fisher Island and was the opening general manager and director of operations for Regent International South Beach and Val Harbor properties. In 2012, when the historic Art Deco Lord Balfour Hotel underwent a complete restoration, Chauncey served as general manager and project manager. In his current role, he oversees a boutique hotel group consisting of 5 historic Art Deco properties: Hotel Ocean, Hotel Breakwater, Hotel Victor, the former Versace Mansion on Ocean Drive, and the Casa Victoria Orchid on Espanola Way. Then the new kid on the block in the middle is Michael Ryan. Michael is filling in this evening for Ricardo Tibet, and Michael is the general manager of Celino South Beach, which is expected to have its much-awaited opening in mid-summer. Yes. In his role, Michael is responsible for driving overall operations and guest satisfaction of the luxury hotel's 132 guest rooms, and currently is overseeing the timeline for opening. An 18-year hospitality veteran, Michael began his hotel career in his native Ireland at Dublin's first boutique lifestyle property, the Clarence Hotel, co-owned by rock legends Bono and The Edge from U2. Maybe you've heard of them. He later served as general manager at the Belize Ocean Club and hotel manager at Gansevoort Meatpacking, New York City for 2 years. Since relocating to Miami in 2005, Michael has held executive positions at the Raleigh Hotel and Soho Beach House, as well as consultancy roles at the Fairwind and Tides Hotel on Ocean Drive. The Celino is a project of Optimum Group, founded by Ricardo Tibet. It includes the restoration of 3 historic buildings, the Park Central Hotel, Heathcote Apartments and Imperial Hotel, and new construction of a fourth in the 600 block of Ocean Drive. Last but not least is Jonathan Plutzik. Jonathan and I laughed. We've done this at least 3 times now in the last 6 weeks, so we're getting used to this routine. Jonathan is the principal owner of the Besty South Beach. After a 25-year career with Credit Suisse First Boston, he retired as vice chairman in 2003. 2 years later, he and his wife Leslie Goldwasser purchased the Betsy Ross Hotel and completed a top-down renovation, reopening the hotel in 2009. They later purchased the neighboring Carlton Hotel, which has also been renovated with its notable orb walkway connecting the 2 buildings and a rejuvenated adjacent alley. Jonathan and the Besty are well known for their philanthropic contributions and commitment to arts and culture. Recently appointed by Mayor Dan Gelber to the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Task Force on Ocean Drive, the panel has 2 subcommittees, and Jonathan chairs the group on business and culture practice. He is also vice chair of the Ocean Drive Association. Lesser known fact, in December, Jonathan was named the new chair of Fannie Mae after serving 9 years on their board. Reactions, right? Okay. All right, so let's start up here with the conversation, and as I always tell folks on my panel, please feel free to ask each other questions as well. We have 1 microphone with a very long cord, so we're going to pass it down amongst the 3 of us. We'll start and go in order and then jump in at any point however you'd like to. Tell us, first of all, what makes Ocean Drive special to you personally?
Well, Ocean Drive is special because what we do have, as you mentioned, we have a number of different properties here up and down the street. But what makes it special is really the group of people that we see come here from all over the world. It's a world destination. There's always a lot of excitement with people coming here. And a big part of the excitement is the fact that it's great to hear that they're celebrating 40 years with the designation for the Art Deco District, because that is something that's a big fascination for people to come. I do recognize a number of the tour guides who you mentioned earlier, and they'll attest to the excitement that they hear from the people that go with them on the history of the place, great interest in people who have on Art Deco design, and then the long history that this area has. So briefly, I mean that basically. That's fun.
Thank you, Chauncey. Just following from what Chauncey spoke about, obviously touching on the clientele and the visitors that come to this wonderful area. For me, it's I'll do the flip side of that equation. As a passionate hotelier, to work in Art Deco properties gives one that little kind of sense of pride. Yeah, and it's really, really special. I was so fortunate when I arrived here in 2005 to work at the Raleigh Hotel, which is a Murray-Dixon property like the Besty. And obviously the Celino, or previously known Park Central, and Imperial is Henry Hohauser from 1937. But for me, I think it's special purely because of the architecture. It is the draw, it is the reason that people come here. And it does have the energy, there's no question about that. But it is that little bit of differentiation from any other destination worldwide. And really that's what does it for me.
Well, I agree with my colleagues, so I won't repeat what they've said. But I am going to say what makes me most excited about Ocean Drive is what we're about to be. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because I'm sure that's going to be a question in a moment.
We've done this before, though.
But actually, somehow, and some of the people sitting in this room are responsible, this thing, these buildings, this architecture, this feeling, this character, was preserved. And we've had, and gentlemen sitting here are in part responsible for it, and those I work for and with. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested over the last several years, and now to sort of reposition this street to be something even greater than it has been in years past. I won't run through all of the things, but it's that actually that excites me the most, what we're about to be as one of the world's great architecture and arts and culture capitals, period.
So let's talk a little bit about the challenges and the push-pull, right, of the historic properties and the hospitality industry, right? Today's needs, customers, visitors, residents, tourists. How do we celebrate the Art Deco architecture while making it work for the hospitality industry and for the visitors who come to Ocean Drive? So, you know, we talk about the cost of real estate, the cost of renovations, as well as the preservation of the architecture, which we've all said is so special, but how do you make it all work together?
Well, what we do with Victor Hotels is we actually incorporate the design that we were lucky enough to inherit, along with by putting in some of the conveniences that a modern day traveler is expecting. So, like, say for example, at the Versace Mansion, we've been preserving the design that Gianni Versace made when he designed the place or redesigned it. But at the same time, we put in some of the other conveniences that people expect, like, you know, the telephones and Wi-Fi and things of that nature. But what we do is we marry that design that was originally there with an understanding by the team of that history. So it deepens the experience of the hotel guest. And at the same time, we try and make the conveniences that people expect, the modern traveler expects. It's not intrusive. It doesn't take away from the design.
Thank you. Yeah, it's such an interesting question, actually. Obviously, the modern day traveler, everyone is looking for something different. And from a hotelier's perspective, it's really about managing expectations. Everyone has different expectations of what they're looking for. But ultimately, answering your question, for the Celino district, as we're going to call it, we have married the new with the old. So, as I've mentioned already, the old Park Central and Imperial buildings and Heathcote, which are historic, we have also built a new atrium building with 12 suites, which also has its own restaurant and a peekaboo rooftop pool. So it has basically something for everyone. You have the old beautiful Art Deco features, you have the vintage elevators, which are certainly a challenge, as you talked about challenges. But we have obviously some of the more lifestyle amenities, which an awful lot of travelers are looking for these days. So for something to have a glass bottom pool in an atrium, right above all of the diners in the restaurants, lunch or dinner, would certainly be a great feature. But you continuously have to evolve because of what obviously the traveler is looking for. And I think that obviously once the historic buildings are preserved, because of all of their natural beauty, but of course you have some of the modern features that guests expect that will allow you to differentiate just that little bit more, but also creating a wonderful experience and having a wonderful product for the travelers coming to Ocean Drive.
You know, I think the GMCDB numbers are that more than 15 million people, tourists, come to Miami Beach each year. And of those 15 million, 11 million of them come to Ocean Drive.
Wow.
I think I have that right. And so, and I'm a preservationist, and rather than viewing it as a burden, it's this astonishing blessing. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that there aren't enormous challenges every day, but I'm grateful for those who stood in front of the bulldozers. I'm actually grateful for the people in the city who protect it every day. Sometimes I wish they moved faster, and I say that with great respect because it's like hard work, but the fact that they're protecting these buildings every day is tremendously important, because absent their protection, we would steadily, notwithstanding I think all the goodwill we bring, people would chip away at it, and pretty soon we'd look like Sunny Isle. But I do want to underscore that without these buildings, without whatever burden we have for room size or height or whatever, those 11 million people would be someplace else. So the burden is very small as compared to the huge benefit that we're getting from the magnet that Ocean Drive is for the entire world. And when we struggle, by the way, and we do, wring our hands as we all live in this Ocean Drive bubble, you know, we got this problem, we got that problem, and spring break, and et cetera, et cetera. Most of the rest of the world thinks we're heaven on earth. So we have some stuff to fix and some issues to address, but we're really blessed when people say Miami and you poke at them, what they're really thinking is Ocean Drive. And as a consequence, how lucky are we?
One of my biggest pet peeves is the Miami, and then they show the Ocean Drive, right? No. Also, this little bit of a push-pull and thought process going on about what is Ocean Drive and what will be on Ocean Drive. Chain restaurants, chain retail, can you restrict, can you curate, should you curate? How do we maintain the character of Ocean Drive? Understand it also has to economically work, but how do you get there?
Well, you know, that is a challenge. That's actually a very good question. Is that we, for example, like in our hotels, we, except for the Versace Mansion, we do have tenants. And we do go through a process of trying to choose the right ones that are going to be both appealing to the visitors as well as the local residents, and at the same time somehow does understand where they are. And that is a challenge. For example, in our hotels, we don't necessarily have themed restaurants per se, but at the same time, the project we just did with Havana 1957, putting them in our Breakwater Hotel. When you look at the design is very much inside of that feeling that does give a nod to the local Cuban community, that food, as well as incorporated in the design of the Breakwater, which is from 1939 and has a long history. So it's something that we do give a lot of thought to. I think that's something that the area can do better at, it is something that we do try to do.
Chauncey. Again, yeah, great question. Obviously, everyone who's here in the room is probably very familiar with the history here of Ocean Drive the last several years since the downturn. As Jonathan alluded to, it's very exciting times. Looking to the future with everything that's happening, I think the area is only going to go from strength to strength. That being said, it's all about neighborhood impact, right? So you have to, as a neighbor, have positive neighborhood impact. And although difficult for landlords to be so selective about their tenants, because again, it's about the financial implication for them, it is important that they are selective to an extent, because it is all about adding value. For example, with our upcoming property, we are fortunate enough to have Inc., who will operate our food and beverage concepts. And anyone who knows Biblos restaurant here in Collins will be familiar with their style of cuisine. But we consider them to be, unrivaled to an extent coming to this area on the southern part of Ocean Drive, where we're going to have two fantastic Mediterranean Italian restaurants. And we believe, in that endeavor, we will assist in raising, I think, the bar for everyone in the locale. And all it takes is a small catalyst, and that is certainly something we want to be part of with everyone here, for the future. But it is more about adding value more than anything else, rather than being too selective. Let me put it that way.
I guess I would say a couple things. One is, I think we have to be tremendously vigilant. I think every single thing that happens on Ocean Drive can either make us, as obvious as this sounds, can either make us better or a little bit worse. And so everything that opens is going to either take us down a half step, or we're going to continue momentum to lift us higher. I think government actually does have a role, because left to our own devices, and lump us all together, left to our own devices, there are often temptations to let people come into our buildings who have checkbooks and the money looks so attractive, and it's hard to say no. And so government has a role, and I think their commission actually did a couple years ago, limitations about drugstores and limitations about certain kinds of chains depending on their size and so forth. So government has a huge role. I think we actually, together, residents and businesses, have a hugely important role. And I would say, I want to repeat, it's really important. Every single thing that happens on Ocean Drive is either going to make us better or worse. And when you see something open that's not good, often associated with it is a lease that causes it to be something that can't be turned around very rapidly because they're in that spot for like 10 years and more. So I'm repeating this word vigilance because only by actually carrying on the momentum created now 40 years ago plus by others can we preserve this thing. And again, I come back to the answer to the first question, which is I think what excites me most about what we can be and what frightens me the most actually is any of us, and I'm throwing us all into the same pot, slipping, doing something that's short-sighted. And there's that risk every single day that one of us could do something short-sighted that will diminish us all.
Stay there, because now you get to go where you want to go. Let's talk about the future. What's next for Ocean Drive?
Well, first there's this amazing moment. I'm going to try to use some self-control and not go on too long. But there's this amazing moment, represented in part by the gentleman sitting next to me. The amount of money, most cities in the world would just dream about this, that there are a group of people prepared to come in and spend more than $500 million, to give you a rough number, to invest in a community like this, by the way, in buildings that have restrictions associated with them. And when you string together, and I apologize in advance for forgetting somebody, but you string together what's happening at the Tides, or 1200, which is the former Palace building. Thrilled, by the way, the Palace found a new home, but 1200 has now been completely renovated. All the work that the Victor complex of hotels is doing. Obviously the Celino, a tremendously important project for our community. The Clevelander just changed hands. They own the Essex right behind the Clevelander, and there's noise about them renovating that building. We bought the Carlton behind us, which by the way is a Hohauser building. So we've connected a Lumber Dixon Hohauser building. Again, I'm apologizing for forgetting, but there's this whole array of things that have gone on with private sector energy, and then layering on top of that the GEO bond, which has associated with it 20 million for Ocean Drive, the street and the sidewalks, the public park, $5 million for Loomis Park, a few million, I think, for this building for renovations upstairs. We're just poised now to begin the voting process for an Ocean Drive bid. David Collins, sitting halfway back, is instrumental in helping us dot all the I's and cross all the T's, which, by the way, is a vote on the part of property owners to oppose a tax on ourselves, not on residents, on ourselves, tax on ourselves, to aggregate that money every year. And our hope is that we're going to be aggregating $2 million every year to supplement the city's sanitation, security, activation of Loomis Park, ambassadors, vegetation, all the above. And all these things are happening like right now. When I rattle off all those properties, we're minutes away, Michael, from the opening of the Celino.
That's right.
Minutes away. And by the way, the bid is a partnership between Ocean Drive and Collins, because we know we can't just kind of make Ocean Drive a little bit prettier or shinier and not do it with Collins as well, going from 5th to 17th. I was just talking a moment ago with George Neary about the Hall property, which is going through a magnificent renovation on Collins and 15th. I'm going to stop talking, but this is all happening like right now. And if you sort of project between now and the Super Bowl, which not everyone will love, but many of us will, who are in business. This will be I think probably fortunately for many of us, will be the center of the world for a week in January 2020. People will talk about the Super Bowl being in Miami, and at some point people will run over to the stadium to watch a game. But this will actually be the center of the world. where we're sitting tonight. Because we represent, all of us represent, what the world thinks of as being Miami. And that's a spectacularly good thing if we manage ourselves between here and there. I don't mean between here and the Super Bowl, but between what we are today and what we're going to become over the next year or two or three, with all the things that I listed, to be a community that can both embrace all these tourists, we hope that are better and better and more deep-pocketed and more refined, and be this incredible cultural center, and be a place where residents want to be hanging out too, because of great restaurants, because of activations in Loomis Park, because of the fact that within a 15-minute walk of here, I won't rattle them all off for you, but you know, we really are the arts and culture capital of the southeastern United States. And what I often say is we've got to sit up a little bit straighter and puff out our chest and keep repeating that over and over again, because it's astonishingly true. We have some work to do on our brand, because our brand's a little bit confusing at the moment, but we're leading to a much, much better place. I'll use some self-control and stop talking.
That's a tough act to follow there. Well, as Susan mentioned, I arrived here in 2005, and Miami Beach was absolutely booming. And during that period, the hotels over by 17th and Collins were considered Hotel Row, between, you know, the Delano and the Raleigh and so forth. And there was a certain sense of cachet about those properties. And from around 2008, you could see the development creeping all the way up towards the Fontainebleau. Obviously, the Faena, most recently the Generator, Como, the Metropolitan, et cetera, Soho House, blah, blah, blah. But what's really, really fantastic for this area right now is because the economy is booming. And the area, this particular area, and some of the properties possibly fell behind in confidence in their product, which is obviously the draw for the guests, the visitors coming to Miami. And this is why it's so fantastic, this particular area right now, with the street development, with the renovations, you know, Jonathan mentioned for Besty, I know Victor had a little while ago. The Tides is still undergoing theirs. They've completed the village. It looks fantastic on the back end of Collins. But it's just really, really great that the properties down here are now stepping up to a different level. The confidence in the product, and the room product, and their level of service, their actual draw for the clients coming to visit. Because we ultimately have to be competitive, because it's all about the rate, the annual daily rate, and of course we're you know, a major employer for the Miami region. But it is great to see all of the development and all of the renovations in these historic buildings, because it's only going to add value, obviously, for the future.
I think you guys have covered it. But basically, we're very excited about all of the planned renovations here on Ocean Drive, especially making a larger pedestrian thoroughfare. I thought that was a wonderful addition. You said you had done a Espanol Way presentation. So I thought that was a huge improvement, because our property over there, the Casa Victoria Orchid, has greatly benefited from that pedestrian thoroughfare over there. I think it'll be the same thing by widening the thoroughfare here, redoing that portion of Loomis Park to make way for the traffic, and actually what you both said is that commitment to improving our product and keeping in mind who we partner with to augment that.
Okay, now we're going to come to you, the audience. So who has questions?
I was just, can you describe what the plan is? I'm not remembering for the widening of the thoroughfare and the Loomis Park issue.
Hi, John. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I say, well, not yet final. You know, the design of what Ocean Drive is going to become, the street part, is still very much a design thing. I think what we do know is that ultimately the sidewalk on the west side will be widened. You know, the reality is we have just too many people for what has been an historically small sidewalk. People are bumping into trees. By the way, people want to pass freely without being necessarily interrupted by someone trying to entice them into the restaurant. So, which parenthetically, I didn't mention when I stood the Ocean Drive Association, you know, which has been around a long time. Mike Palma of the Clevelander is the chairman. we're spending a tremendous with a code of conduct which imposed on sort of all operators, making them sign things to say how they're going to behave, watching carefully what their ratings are on sort of social media sites, whacking them in the head with a baseball bat when they, don't perform or when the people are too aggressive. By the way, do we have it all right yet? The answer is no, but I must say the operators, and this is where, frankly, I hope that business people, operators, and residents actually can find a lot of common ground. We're like really obsessed about improving the quality of experience on the sidewalk and in the street, and that's a place where we actually have absolutely aligned interests. We actually get worried and mad when someone misbehaves who's operating a business. So anyway, wider sidewalks, more beautiful road. I think probably some kind of bollards that'll protect the pedestrians and make it possible to more easily convert the street from time to time from vehicular traffic to pedestrian. We're all quite obsessed, and the committee that I'm chairing for the mayor on culture and business practices, very focused on Loomis Park and its activation, bringing art to the park. So one of the ways that money is going to be spent actually is on infrastructure. The infrastructure being, we've got to run a lot more electric there to be able to support the lighting that we need to make that place not only appear more festive and inviting, but actually as a consequence be safer. The brighter, keeping in mind the turtles, but the brighter seasonally, the better. And of course, in today's world, because of technology, you can get colors that actually don't adversely affect the turtles. And you can basically flick a switch and have it go from good to bad or bad to good for the turtles. But the running the wires, actually, probably you didn't notice, but last Christmas we had some challenges around the trees because there wasn't enough power in the park to light all the lights that had been put in the trees, so they kept going off. So there's a big rush actually, because if we look ahead to the fall, again, Super Bowl in January, of course the holidays, Art Basel, working our way back. There's the soon to be announced but publicly known Miami Pop Festival, which is Veterans Day weekend with some high-end acts. Again, not yet announced, but it'll be on the beach. So there's a series of events actually that are, I think, quite neighborhood and community conducive. But as a consequence of all that, we can't just get ready for the Super Bowl. We have to be ready really by October 1st with many of these things. So we're ready to go for the season, and I mean the season for all of us, not just for the guys who are coming back and forth from the north. So that's kind of a half an answer.
I think the plans sound wonderful. Do those plans include greater parking availability? Parking availability.
The question is, will it include more parking availability? Well, it's a really interesting question about which I'm not an expert generally in Miami Beach. I will say a couple things, which is actually people are very preoccupied with that. One of the big questions kind of on the table generally, and there are 1,000 different points of view, is, what should be the nature of the Ocean Drive road? Should there be parking on both sides? Should it be one way? How frequently should it be closed to cars? And there are some that believe, one row of parking should be eliminated. I'm not advocating that, and I'm not suggesting that a conclusion could reach. But it's a topic that's the subject of a lot of conversation. So good news is people are talking about it. Bad news is they don't have an answer for it yet.
Michael, Chauncey, want to talk about parking? You don't have to, just, okay.
Yeah, right. I see George has a question there.
Yeah, I just
Oh, I see.
wanted to say it's so nice to hear arts and culture being mentioned after so many years of being here. I would also ask, and I'm so thrilled, I worked with the Adventure Bureau when the Super Bowl is Holy Grail, but I would love for you folks to talk more about Art Basel in the same breath, because Art Basel really does one for us internationally, and I think we don't recognize it enough, so if you guys don't talk about it, no one's going to realize it. So I would ask you in your conversations with other people, that's number one. Number two, I'm always beating the LGBTQ drum, and I don't hear it mentioned ever. The largest event in Miami Beach is the Gay Pride event that's held on where? The white party, where is it held? Ocean Drive. the winter party, sorry. So, and on and on. So what I'm just suggesting, and if you want to relate to that in the way that you folks have your properties, I'd be happy to hear that. But I'm just suggesting more often that we hear of those groups more, because that is the future of this city, and you need to always.
Can I make?
Well, with something, I'm just going to say that without the LGBTQ community, there would be no Ocean Drive, there would be no preservation, there would be no Versace Mansion, and we all wouldn't be here tonight. So we cannot be inclusive of them when we go forward.
Can I? First, obviously, we salute the extended picture about everything George has done over a hugely extended period in our community. I think one of the things we actually have to be really vigilant about is how we project our image, and we have to stop projecting it as a skinny, perfectly tan, white heterosexual couple with two beautiful white kids. And, you know, again, we have to be very vigilant about that, because one of the things mentioned earlier about why this is such a great community is its astonishing diversity in every way you measure diversity. And we just have to make sure we communicate that we are the future of America, and in some respect, the future of the world. It's part of what makes Miami Beach so appealing to people, because everybody belongs here. And I'm thrilled that George underscored the role of the LGBTQ community here. The arts and culture thing, we got to have our heads examined, because, again, I'm repeating myself, but it's hugely important, is literally a 10-minute walk from here. Again, I'm not going to rattle them off, however tempting it is, but there's no place else in the world. I mean, by the way, it's true in New York City, but it's a lot less easy to get to them. These great museums that surround us, the idea of the New World Symphony, one of the great concert halls in America. By the way, I went to the final concert of the season on Saturday night, and when I walked in, I bumped into Michael Tilson Thomas's partner Joshua, who was beaming because he had just been on the roof and he'd taken a picture of the crowd in the park. And that, I don't know how many people it was, but I'm going to say 3,000. It was one of the most beautiful sights that you could have in the world. And it's right in the heart of our community. And by the way, the other great sites of Miami are a 10 or 15 minute car ride away. And I pretend, by the way, that the Perez and the Arch are actually Miami Beach, because they're just on the other side of the water. We're like barely in Miami. So, by the way, for our businesses, for the rates we want to charge, for the restaurants we want to support, we have to communicate to the world that actually that's what's so special about our community. Yeah, the arts and culture and the diversity married to all that beautiful architecture.
Just simply, George, just remember, I have 6 ocean front suites with balconies for the parade, all right? I'll give you a great price. But as I mentioned earlier, you know, when I arrived in Miami, there was a sense of, you know, the cachet when it comes to these 5 pressure periods, you know, particularly Art Basel or Swim Week. Where there was a sense that it was all heading north, which, you know, if you had maybe 5-6 years ago thought about, you know, how the hotels on South Beach, and particularly this area, would fare in the future, you know, you'd be somewhat concerned. And I think, you know, it is brilliant to see this development happening, and all of these events now come into Ocean Drive and being on the beach right across the road. So, you know, food and wine in February, and we've touched on Basel, and, you know, New Year's Eve and July 4th, you know, fireworks viewing, model basketball, volleyball. So it's great that it has kind of stopped the bleeding from this area in that sense, with, you know, a destination for culture, right? And they're not heading north as much. And now to have, for example, you have some great exhibitions in your property, and we plan on doing the same at Celino. So watch this space for activations coming up in November, December. We're super excited, and I'm sure you'll know all about it.
Well, I was very glad you did say that, George, because that is very much the center of what we do. During the Pride campaign parade just recently, we actually had NBC6 headquartered at the Victor, and we did broadcasting from there. We're very much participating in the parade. And we all know the history, obviously, of the Versace mansion, as was mentioned. But that's something which is very important. I'm glad that you actually brought that up. As far as Art Basel, that's also very much the center of what we do, and I think obviously the center of a lot of activity here on Ocean Drive during Art Basel. You know, we always do artistic installations in all of our properties during that, and as well along with all the other activities and events. So what you said was super important and is a center. Obviously, we're very excited about Super Bowl. So glad that they renovated the stadium. But that really is the center of what we do. So I was so glad you said that.
Nancy?
I stood up because I can't see.
He was commenting on the chairs.
I would like to know, but let me just throw out the word, and maybe you can add to it. Music. There is still a problem that goes on out here. And I think that's part of what is or might hold back the changing culture. As long as we have music that makes this building shiver when it's on full blast. And I know that there are places that cannot blast that music. I don't think any of you are in music.
Oh no, we're right in the center of that. We're actually a big cause of that.
Do you think that that's good or?
No, it's a big challenge. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's something that is our hotels, or some of our hotels, are right in the center of the cacophony, so to speak. You know, and it is very loud, and it does go on very long. It is a challenge for us. There are a lot of people who come to Ocean Drive to have that experience, but there's also a lot of people who don't appreciate that experience. So it's something that we always discuss. I know there's been some recent legislation and discussion on limiting the noise, and it's certainly not for everybody. And I know it's something that we, at Victor Hotels anyway, we have daily discussions about it, because our properties are part of that noise.
I know that it's been said that the Betsy, and now I still call
Celino.
The Celino, yes. I mean, it's a really, really interesting question. And, you know, I mentioned, you know, the adverse neighborhood impact phrase earlier on, and I think anyone here who's had time at City Hall will know exactly where that's coming from. I mean, it's a challenge from, you know, the operator's perspective. Really, it comes down to the concept of the property, you know, the clientele they're targeting. So it's a challenge, I can be honest, from the operator's perspective. You know, for this area specifically, I think that, you know, there has to be a happy medium. I mean, I live on 10th and Euclid, and I can hear the music. All right, so I'll put that out there. Although, you know, I was just whispering to Jonathan there, I think it was about 6 weeks ago for spring break weekend, when the streets were closed here, and, you know, I'm walking my dog, and I expected it to be pandemonium, you know, like it is nearly every year to an extent. But it was actually quite nice. You know, people were on the street, the cafes were full, you could hear people talking as you're walking along the boardwalk here. It was actually refreshing. There were 2 establishments that had very loud music. It is what it is. But I don't think it affected the overall ambiance for everyone's experience. I don't think it had a negative, you know, impact on anyone else. Certainly that was my impression at the time. But it is about having a happy medium per se. It shouldn't affect, you know, I should not affect my immediate neighbors, for example, at the Majestic, same for Chauncey, and obviously, you know, I don't think the Betsy's ever had those issues, because it isn't, you know, that type of property. But it's a challenge. It is a challenge, and I think that, you know, certain establishments that have conditional use permits, they do flaunt it. It is really down to city code. they're not impartial, from my experience. I hate to say it, but for now, it's really about just for us to be, good managers and good operators and good owners, and to lead by example. And you have to have something for everyone visiting the area. But if it's too much of one and not enough of the other, the abnormal becomes the norm, and that's when you have a problem. And I think we need to get away from that.
When people knew that you were coming to the south part of Ocean Drive, they were thrilled because you were going to be a bookend with the north part, where it is so civil and so it has a whole different feeling, and that's what we're kind of expecting from your end. But I have to ask the last question. If that music that everybody really doesn't enjoy, when the windows are rattling, the roof is shaking, we have meetings upstairs, design preservation meetings. Sometimes we can't hear ourselves talk upstairs. So I'm wondering if that noise were controlled, and it can be the city that can do it, only the city, is that going to hurt Ocean Drive, or is it going to help it for the future?
Well, I mean, that's the ultimate question, right? So who are we targeting to come and visit here?
Good year or so.
It's ultimately basically if we were to do away with that level of music, will it have a dramatic adverse effect on the area? But I mean, that's the ultimate question. Who do we want to visit here, right? It's tough. I mean, as I've already mentioned, I think a happy medium between each of the properties, where it's not too much of one and less of the other, right? So you have wonderful, historic hotels and wonderful service and wonderful products and the F&B component, but not too much of the party scene. It just, has to be a happy, yeah.
Nancy, the only thing I would add is, I think we have to be careful about unintended consequences. And one of the topics that gets talked about from time to time in meetings that I'm in is, again, should we have cars on Ocean Drive? Should be a one-way on Ocean Drive? I think actually, and I always answer, I'm not a traffic guy, I don't know what the right answer is, but I hope we don't do something without being thoughtful about it, studying it, because I don't know what the consequences are. And similarly, we sometimes get really mad about stuff, and we want to fix it next week, and then we're going to fix it by pulling some plug. And I'm expressing even though, we run a quiet property, and if you go by, you're more likely to hear. You're going to hear Victor moan, you're not going to hear or opera, right, live or recorded. So the only point that I want to express is I think we have to be careful about unintended consequences. We do have a diverse neighborhood. We do have all these people that come here. By the way, if they stop coming, I'm not saying everybody, but if we fundamentally change the character of the neighborhood, it'll destroy a lot of business and a lot of people lose jobs. And so we have to kind of find the right balance. But as I say that, I want to emphasize we're obsessed at the Ocean Drive Association with behavior and hostesses and who's accosting whom and how loud the music is, and is it fair for the Estefans to have beautiful Larios and have the place next door blasting some music that's not consistent with their, these are all really issues that have to be addressed, and they got to be addressed with urgency. But I don't want people to do it, this is my 2 cents, I don't want people to do it when they're mad. I want them to sit down and talk about it thoughtfully and figure out what the right path is to get it right. Because we are lucky. Most communities in the country would die to have the energy we have on Ocean Drive. So the question is how you fine tune it to get it to a place so all of us, and I live here too, are happy with what it is, that it's safe and clean, and you can walk from one end to the other without being accosted by somebody you don't want to be accosted by, or a snake charmer, or a lemur guy, or any of those things. But we have to do it with care. That's all I'm saying. We have to do it with care.
Next question.
I think one of the things that gets overlooked is the fact that you have to bring employees in and out, because needless to say, they can't afford to live here. Nor, for that matter, can they afford the cost of parking. So you need some public transportation in order to bring them here. I'm not saying down Ocean Drive, that's, that would be silly to suggest that, but you certainly have 1-2 blocks away, you could put in what was once here, which was a nice little streetcar arrangement, and in fact, have it going onto the mainland. Years ago, I lived in the Keys. You have buses that bus people all the way down to Marathon, which is quite a distance away from Florida City, because that's where they get their employees from. And right now, I'm sure, I don't have the employee problem, but I'm sure that you guys definitely have employee problems trying to draw people in that just can't make it to work because they've got a flat tire or something. So,
there are places where government has to be very active, and this is one of those spots. I happened to have lunch today with a group of employees, kind of middle-level employees, and it's so easy to forget that many of them work 8 hours for us and then go down the street and work 8 hours for him, because otherwise they can't do. And by the way, they've traveled an hour and a half to get each way. These are really challenging lives. So not only to make our community better for those of us who live here, public transportation, et cetera, but for those who work here, it's a critical element. And I share your desire, I think, for government to get really deeply engaged in it. By the way, it's about to get worse before it gets better because of all the construction that's about to begin on the causeways.
You guys are in a position of encouragement. You guys are the ones that make those politicians decide one way or another. And the fact of the matter is that it would butter your bread very, very well to have decent public transportation so you would have better choices for your employees. A lot of the difficulties that you run into with the people accosting you on the street and so forth is because they're dying to get a buck for a tip or whatever it is. And you're right, because I knew them in the Keys. They'd work in one place and then walk across the street and work the next 8 hours at another place.
You're 100% right. And one point I do want to make is that I want to underscore, not going to show pity on us, but underscore the amount of time that we spend with our political leadership. By the way, not trying to get them to turn the music up louder, but actually to work with them to actually create a more civil environment that all of us can be happy and productive in. We're at it literally every day. So I share and embrace it completely, but I also want to comfort you that we spend a lot of time doing exactly that. We haven't solved all the problems for sure.
We're going to come to Jack, and then this one right here.
Another of the major annual events that takes place on Ocean Drive is Art Deco Weekend, which is sponsored by the Miami Design Preservation League. My name is Jack Chauncey, and I'm the chair of the board at FEDL. And I'm very interested to know, how does Art Deco Weekend affect your businesses? How can you interact with us with regard to Art Deco Weekend? And what would you like to see us do with Art Deco Weekend that would be helpful to you?
All right, I think that's a great question. The Art Deco Weekend is a big part of what we do with Victor Hotels, because we have hotels up and down the street. I think that it's always a big, it's always a very successful weekend for us. And also the atmosphere is actually a little bit more, especially more family oriented. That is something that we want to encourage. One of the things that what is good is that we do want to have, the Victor Hotel entity does want to have more interaction with the Art Deco Center and the Art Deco Preservation League, because I think that very much our hotels are inside of what you espouse, which is good. Going back to what the gentleman said and what Nancy had said earlier, is that one of the things, being one of the producers of the noise that was mentioned, it's something that we are actually looking for, that kind of interaction with the municipality Two, we're constantly reminding our partners, our business partners about decibel levels and how it affects people. We're very much aware of being in a building across the street and the windows shaking, like as Nancy said. So it's something that we want to walk that line that Ryan was mentioning also. And it is a big challenge for our employees finding parking. It's actually sometimes a decision maker whether they accept a position with us or not. Sometimes we lose good employees because it's too difficult for them. And one of the big things in some of the developments that we've seen lately is we had hoped to see some more parking garages and things like that put in, and with fees that were accessible. But that's not the projects that went up. So it's something that we do need that participation by the municipality to be inside that. And also if there are public, I've been in different locales where there is a transportation that brings in the employees, which makes it easier for them, better for the properties. So I think that's a good point and something we want to look forward to.
Do you want to talk about Art Deco weekend?
Yeah, just very briefly on and I'm so happy you brought up obviously transportation. We're in the final phases for the Celino District project, and right now is one of the most challenging times. Obviously, there's a million and one things to do, I can assure you, and the talent acquisition is key for our overall success. But it's something that actually gives me sleepless nights. The majority of the hotel staff, who work on an hourly basis, do not live on South Beach. Probably more so, the hourly staff that live on South Beach, certainly in my experience here, are within the F&B business and who do live on tips, but an awful lot of the back of house positions with engineering and housekeeping and so forth, they travel. They travel an hour and a half, 2 hours, 2 buses, 3 buses, etc. So this is one of the most difficult times, for an opening from my perspective, is being able to acquire the right talent, because, the rates of pay, it's very difficult for small independent boutique properties to compete, with the likes of Faina or the Fontainebleau, etc., when they're talking about rates of pay or benefits and so forth. But it is something that it's on our radar, and obviously we have to get very, very creative, as operators, to make it worthwhile for them to want to travel here. So it's nice that you brought that up. It's very thoughtful. With regard to obviously Art Deco weekend, and we're happy to play to our strengths. We're a true Art Deco property. So we're not open yet. We're definitely going to participate. One of the other things as well that George Neary's been helping me out for the last couple of months, and it's been fabulous, is we will have an extensive monthly programming calendar in effect at the hotel, and that will be for guests and locals alike. So, we will have culture, we'll have fun, and we'll have fitness. So every week, every month, excuse me, we will have a detailed monthly programming calendar, and obviously the cultural side of Art Deco tours and different things like this, and having guest speakers and so forth will be a huge part of that. So obviously I welcome you, any of you to please come along and check it out anytime you want.
Well, Jack, I would say a couple things. One is, obviously, we're tremendously admiring of what the MBPL does, and the importance of the Art Deco weekend. I want to tell you one quick story, because I was involved a little bit when I don't know what it's called, artisanal market, which now is open on Saturdays and Sundays. I walked out the front of our hotel one day, and there were these new blue tents that had popped up kind of overnight, and with no sides, and as a consequence of no sides, their goods were spilling out. And the fellow who runs it was sent to me, and I said, look, here's the deal. You got to go find the most beautiful, elegant white tents you can find. They've got to have backs on them, so people's coolers they bring filled with goods they want to sell are not seen by anybody, and it presents in the most upscale, elegant way you can. So we all collectively can be proud of it. I think the boardwalk that goes behind all the hotels that empties out in front of our hotel, but really it's the big reveal of Ocean Drive. And when they had those ugly blue tents, it made my gesture. And now he's got these beautiful tents. The reason I'm bringing it up is I think we all have a challenge. Art Deco weekend is fantastic, By the way, the Versace mansion is fantastic, but it's getting better and better. And I'm proud about the Besty, but we're getting better and better. I think what how does it get 25% better by who it attracts, what vendors, the quality of the things being sold, just as we're all challenged, as we're all trying to kind of elevate the street. So how do we go from good to great in all of those things? And I think there's potential, frankly, in Art Deco Weekend, as great as it is, to get even to a more fantastic place. Make 2 cents.
So there's a woman right here that I said was next. Right?
Yeah, a couple of questions. One is, what do you have planned to better spring break? Make it better? What is specifically? I mean, I hear that you're very candid about the challenges. But the brand, by doing some of these things, seems to really be deteriorating. And you use the word challenge. That's a nice word. You're working towards an issue and trying to make it better. But is there something specific, a specific plan to try to work towards a better solution? And this is, again, you're developing a bid, I think. Would that help?
Can I start there? Well, first, let me say, this is like a really hard challenge. You know, the month of March is so interesting because we have the most affluent travelers in the world staying on Ocean Drive, and we have spring break kids. If you came to the Besty, it would be filled from people all over the world spending a lot of money. You know, we talk about our brand. Again, I want to distinguish between what we see and what the world thinks. And by the way, if that remains different for a very long time, the world will think less well of us. But I do want to underscore, right now, the world thinks we're the greatest place in the world. I'm not joking. And by the way, I read actually to this committee that I'm chairing for the mayor, a line, there was an article in Ocean Drive magazine, talked a lot about the Celino, a little bit about the Besty. But the guy, you know, the guy who wrote the article, I think that was the article where the guy said, who can't love Ocean Drive? The same weekend as the spring break thing was happening, we're all wringing our hands. What we can't do, and I want to be as clear as I can about this, what we can't do is, you know, pull up a bus and handcuff a lot of young college kids and drag them off. That's not happening. And by the way, young people will be young people. What we have to do, frankly, and I keep mentioning this $500 million of investment, the reality is when you have a beautiful Celino, the people, and we can see how beautiful it's going to be, the people are going to stay there who can afford what they're going to charge to eat and stay will attract a different clientele. And it's a progressive problem. The city political figures are, you know, deeply focused on it. You know, policing is really complicated. I mean, it's a really complicated thing. And as our outgoing chief of police, who some people love and some people are less enthusiastic about, but he often says, you know, when you've got body cameras, arresting somebody is never a pretty thing, okay? And what we don't want to have happen, we want to enforce the law, and we don't want to tolerate misbehavior in the streets, but we also don't want NBC in New York sending images around the world of us dragging young people off to jail. So it's a very complicated thing. But all I can tell you is that there are probably some businesses on Ocean Drive, I could speculate about a few, that are happy with what happens, but actually almost none. If you actually look at what it does to their business, even the places that you think would do well because of those crowds of kids, if they could snap their fingers, they wish it would all go away. And one of the things that we didn't so adversely affect us because we're at the northern end and the nature of our guests, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of those businesses, you know, gave information to City Hall about how their businesses were financially hurt during spring break. So if there's a headline that I want to leave you with, maybe a couple. One is, we're actually in it completely together. It's actually not a bunch of businesses who are promoting this thing. There are promoters who come to town who promote this thing, and the city is either passed or about to pass new rules that prevent promoters from running these parties that attract young people from around the country. That's very helpful. But we are deeply, deeply in it together. We're not on different sides about this, but it's kind of a progressive issue. Look, I'm going to point to Memorial Day weekend now with the Air and Sea Show. You know, I don't know, for those of you that hung around for Memorial Day weekend, the Air and Sea Show made a dramatic difference about sort of the attractiveness of being on Ocean Drive or nearby or on the beach for families. It changed overnight, even as we had some issues about Memorial Day weekend still. People were attracted to be here because of the airplanes. It was the coolest thing in the world. So we have kind of a multifaceted, complex police, politics, self-management, we run our businesses, banning cars, complex array of things that are not going to be fixed overnight. But I want to go back actually to my answer to a question that I used the same answer to Nancy earlier, which is if we think we can like snap our fingers and make it perfect overnight, I think we're deluding ourselves. And we really do have to be focused on sort of the unintended consequences of this. So again, I say that not to support craziness, but I say it to support us not doing knee-jerk things, but building beautiful new hotels, investing in hotels we already have and making them better, having the kind of cultural programs that Michael's talking about that we've had for years. I don't want to brag about the Besty, but I'm going to tell you about two things that have moved into the Besty this year. One is O Miami, which if you don't know, O Miami is Miami's great poetry festival. It's 6 or 7 years old. It's been funded by the Knight Foundation primarily, run by a really visionary poet named Scott Cunningham. The Knight Foundation was looking for a home. It's now in the Besty. The Knight Foundation gave them a going away gift of $1.25 million in the fall. It's the most important poetry festival probably in the Southeast. It's just now finishing a month of poetry, April being National Poetry Month. Also moving into the Besty is something called the Miami Music Festival, Miami Classical Music Festival. It attracts about 300 students this year. These are kids who come from conservatories. They're going to be doing their training at the high school. They're going to do between 70 to 80 concerts in Miami Beach. These guys don't know it yet, but they may end up on the steps of their hotels before it's over. Opera, orchestra, chamber music. These are all things that are happening in our community between June 1st and July 30th. 70 to 80 concerts in Miami Beach, virtually all free. And we have to do more and more of those things, and if we do them, and we cooperate this way, and we cooperate this way, I think we're on the right path. But between here and there are going to be some Saturdays and Sundays, I hope fewer and fewer of them, where we're going to wring our hands and say, that wasn't very good. But I don't want to, there's no like magic. We have to grind away at it. I mentioned Miami and the Miami Classical Music Festival for a reason, because those are two examples, I'm not taking credit for them, examples of things. Michael talked about his cultural calendar, which I'm thrilled to hear about. You know, we've had the fortune of doing it for years. It makes a huge difference. It mostly serves residents. It's nice for guests, but it's mostly for residents. And as we say, without commerce, without community, there is no commerce. So you gotta like build it all. We're doing it together.
Let me ask you.
So, sorry.
I just want to ask you the promoters. Have you figured out a way, since you've identified it's often the promoter's problem, not you, the businesses?
You know, with Ocean Drive Association has a great executive director in Ceci Velasquez, you know, who's had a long history, very experienced professional. We hire a person, his name is Michael DeFelipe, who walks the street.
He's right there.
There he is. Who's this guy, who I'm proud to say the Ocean Drive Association pays, but what he does is unbelievable. And what he does is walk the street and grab us all by the lapels and say that light is out, that sidewalk is dirty. Mike Palmer, who runs the Ocean Drive Association, I have a joke, is whenever we get a report from Michael, we quickly scan down to see what we've done wrong. You know, because, and I get emails from Michael at least once a week about something, again, the light bulb's out, there's something dirty, fix it up. We're like, to make this thing successful, it's not like you get it fixed and it's fixed. It's like everyday grinding, and if you kind of lift it up every day and don't let it slip, we can get to a magnificent place for the residents, and I think for the businesses as well. So, but it's not going to be without stumbles. But I want to sort of underscore the gentleman asked earlier about leaning on government. We're like leaning on them every single day. Yesterday I was meeting with the city because the corner of, I hope there's no one here from the city. Our guy, the city's doing a great job in so many ways. But I mean that. No, I do mean that. We have actually, I'm a huge fan of the city manager and the mayor, and they're actually trying really, really hard. But we know with our guy, if he wasn't doing a good job, we can grab him by the lapels and say, Michael, do a better job. It turns out Michael's doing a fantastic job, and he's doing it on all of our behalf.
Okay, so
Thank you, Michael.
I'm going to do one more question, and then we'll wrap it up here. The promoter ordinance did pass first reading, and there's one more reading, although it was unanimous, so they've already sent the letters out to the promoters warning them in advance of Memorial Day. So
I heard a story yesterday, a little blur mine, I'm sorry, which is a very senior city official told me that a promoter was selling tickets to an event on the beach that didn't exist. You know, and you think of these young people who are coming.
Were they Chinese by any chance?
I don't know. Actually, it's interesting. What, you know, young people coming in, the guy's promoting, promoting this thing. They got T-shirts. You know, tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. That's gonna be fantastic on the beach. $20. No event at all. So these guys that sort of arrive in town, they don't have the stake in the town that you do and we do.
One more. Michael.
My question is actually for Michael. I'm really looking forward to Celino. I always talk it up and say it's going to be a very classy property. It's going to change a lot down there. But my challenge is it's very interesting. You're surrounded by a couple, in my opinion, lower-end restaurant establishments that are going to be hawking your guests right when they come out of your facility. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that challenge? And how can you get these properties to be more like you? I guess it's going to be very challenging. It's going to be like complete opposite of what you're trying to put out there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting you brought that up because it's kind of following what Jonathan was saying. I mean, for us, you know, I'm actually alluding to spring break. For us, all we can do as operators and developers, managers, is manage the asset to the best of our ability, right? So, you know, you're responsible for what's within your control. And that's all you can do. It's a very straightforward, very simple, very short answer. And that's what we will do. You know, our owner has a very clear vision for his, you know, this pet project of his. It's an asset in the property he absolutely adores. I'm very fortunate to have been handed the reins to deliver this for him. But you know, I'm somewhat confident, as most GMs are, and somewhat arrogant in being able to deliver, you know, a great product, you know, with great service and great amenities for our guests. You know, so we'll have overall customer retention. We'll have to see how it goes with regard to, you know, that sidewalk outside the property. You know, we will have our own internal security on site. We do have serious professionals with, you know, the ink management team with the F&B component. And, you know, we'll be leaning on, you know, our neighbors' help, and, you know, be looking at Miami Beach Police to assist as needed. We certainly hope we will be calling them, you know, for anything like that. But it's really about us just, you know, managing our asset. And, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's more that, you know, the more value added we can make the Celino, it should be a domino effect. You know, someone mentioned the bookends for Ocean Drive earlier.
Yes.
Love that one. And but there's so much more than, you know, two ends. But I think that, you know, as we continuously, you know, strive to enhance the property or the overall experience for guests coming through, and obviously for the locals, it will bring in a different clientele. And it will be that domino effect that each one will ultimately realize it's going to be better for them as business operators and owners, and obviously for the district itself. So we'll see how that, you know, shakes out, but it's not something I'm hugely concerned about yet. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so to wrap up, let me
Here's the 60-second ending. Each of you tell me in 60 seconds, what is the unique thing that your property brings or will bring to Ocean Drive?
I guess the unique thing we bring is constantly trying to improve our product and interact with the local business association to try and make sure that what we're reflecting is also what some of these goals are that we've been talking about.
I would say me. I'm awesome. I would actually say, that we're, the marriage of the old and the new, the three historic buildings. So we just have a wonderful, Art Deco property, with our new atrium, with, as I mentioned earlier, our 12 balcony suites and peekaboo glass bottom pool. So I think that's a certain unique selling point that will be very popular, I think, for the visitors of the property.
I guess we have a chance to brag a tiny bit. So, but I'm going to say, which you probably don't know, but about a year and a half ago in New York City, we were honored with 10 other institutions, other hotels, as being one of the 10 most important institutions in the United States for our support of the arts. So that's a hotel on Ocean Drive. So when we get all kind of tied up in knots, we collectively, about how terrible it is, there are actually some astonishing things that have been going on for a while. There's some really, really astonishing things to come. So I'm asking all of you actually to be tremendously optimistic about what's next. And let's commit ourselves actually to join hands to make it actually work together, because we're definitely not on opposite sides. Our interests are perfectly aligned. Thank you.